I prayed for peace my whole life. Every morning before coffee, every night before sleep. Peace in the world, peace in my life, peace in my heart that never quite healed completely. Today, the TV announces a historic peace agreement and the release of hostages held captive for over a decade. I stop in front of the screen, plate in hand, heart beginning to race without understanding why. But then I see. Among the tired faces, thin, marked by time and suffering, I recognize a look. Those brown eyes that haunted my dreams for 15 years. It's impossible. It's unthinkable. It's my husband. The plate slips from my hands as if it had a life of its own. The sound of glass shattering on the kitchen floor echoes through the silent apartment, but I barely register it. My knees give way, and I fall onto the couch, trembling in a way I can't control. On screen, the reporter continues talking with that professional, distant voice journalists use for tragedies that aren't theirs. He mentions American citizens who disappeared between 2008 and 2012. Michael disappeared in March 2008. He's there. Thinner, much thinner. Bearded, gray hair where it used to be dark brown. But it's him. After 15 years, it's him. I whisper his name to the empty apartment, and the word sounds strange in my mouth. Michael. It's been so long since I spoke it aloud. So long since it existed anywhere but in my thoughts, in my silent prayers, in the imaginary conversations I have with him during sleepless nights. 15 years. 15 years since I woke up on a Tuesday morning, and he simply wasn't there anymore. 15 years since the police told me there were no leads, that people sometimes disappear, that I should accept it and move on. But how do you move on when half of you disappears too? I grab the remote control with trembling hands and turn up the volume, as if that could give me more information, as if it could confirm I'm not going crazy. The reporter talks about the Reintegration Center in Boston, about medical exams, about the long process of readaptation. Readaptation. As if it were possible to readapt to a life that stopped existing 15 years ago. I don't sleep. How could I? I stay on the couch until dawn, alternating between watching news replays and walking through the apartment like a ghost. Every familiar object seems different now. The table where we ate our last meal together. The armchair where he used to read the newspaper on Sundays. The hook on the wall where he hung his car keys. Keys that were never found. Does he remember these details? Does he remember how I liked my coffee too strong and how he always complained I'd get an ulcer? Does he remember the way I hummed in the shower, off-key but happy? Does he remember me? The question hits me like a punch to the stomach. 15 years of captivity. 15 years of God knows what kind of trauma. It's possible he doesn't remember anything. It's possible I'm just another stranger to him now. Or worse, it's possible he remembers me, but not the woman I've become. He left a 27-year-old wife, full of dreams and plans for the future. Now I'm a 42-year-old woman, marked by loss, independent by necessity, different in every way. Will he recognize me? At 5 a.m, I give up trying to sleep. I shower, dress carefully as if it were a first date. In a way, it is. My phone rings at 7:30. Unknown number. For an insane moment, I think it might be him. But it's a female voice, formal and gentle. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Elena Rodriguez from the Boston Reintegration Center. Could you come here today? We have a situation that requires your attention. Situation. What a strange word to describe the return of the dead. Is it about Michael? I ask, and my voice sounds firmer than I feel. Yes, ma'am. He specifically asked to speak with you. Said he has a wife in Boston, Sarah Mitchell. He remembers my name. He remembers he's my husband. Something inside my chest loosens like a knot that's been tight for 15 years. What time? I ask. Whenever you can come. He's anxious to see you. Anxious. As if it were just a few days since we last saw each other, not a decade and a half. After I hang up, I stand in the kitchen, looking at the shards of the plate I broke last night. They're still there, scattered across the floor like fragments of my previous life. I pick up a broom and start gathering the pieces. Some are large, easy to pick up. Others are tiny, almost invisible, but they cut when you least expect it. Like memories. I go to the school where I've taught English for 8 years. I started working there 3 years after Michael disappeared, when I finally accepted I needed stable income, a routine, something that gave me purpose beyond waiting for someone who might never return. Before, I worked part-time at an independent bookstore downtown. It was a job I loved, even though it paid little, because Michael earned well as an engineer and I could afford the luxury of choosing passion over pragmatism. What naive luxury that was. Betty Collins, my 65-year-old Irish neighbor who became my confidant over the years, is waiting for me in the school parking lot. She has this maternal way of sensing when something's wrong, even when I try to hide it, especially when I try to hide it. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," she says, placing her hand on my arm with that gentleness only people who've been through real losses can have. And maybe I have seen a ghost. Or maybe a ghost has come back to life. I tell her about Michael, about the TV, about the call from the reintegration center. Betty listens in silence, her expression gradually changing from surprise to concern. "My God," she whispers when I finish. "My God, Sarah." She hugs me then, right there in the school parking lot, and I realize I'm crying. I didn't cry when I saw Michael on TV. The shock was too great for tears. But now, with Betty holding me like a mother holds a daughter, the tears come like a flood that's been dammed up for too long. "What are you going to do?" she asks when I pull away. "I'm going to see him today," I answer, and my voice sounds more determined than I feel. Betty hesitates, and I see the concern in her blue eyes. "Sarah, dear, are you sure you're ready for this?" It's a fair question. How does someone prepare to reunite with the dead? How do you prepare to confront 15 years of grief, of rebuilding, of learning to live alone? "No," I admit, "but I'm going anyway." Betty nods, understanding. "Want me to go with you?" The offer touches me deeply. Betty lost her husband 10 years ago. Cancer, not mysterious disappearance, but loss nonetheless. She understands the weight of rebuilding a life on the ashes of another. "Thank you, but I need to do this alone." "Then at least call me afterward. Promise?" "I promise." She hugs me once more before I enter the school. "Sarah, whatever man you meet today, remember the strong woman you've become. Don't lose sight of her." The Reintegration Center is a discreet government building in downtown Boston, hidden among law offices and medical clinics. There are no flashy signs, nothing indicating the type of miracles and tragedies that happen within these walls. It's just another gray building on a street full of gray buildings. But for me today, it's the place where the dead come back to life. Elena Rodriguez receives me at the entrance. She's a Latina woman about 38 years old, with black hair pulled back in an impeccable bun and kind eyes behind discreet framed glasses. There's something about her posture that immediately reassures me. She's done this before, already guided other people through this impossible process of reuniting with someone who returned from the dead. "Mrs. Mitchell," she says, extending her hand with a professional but genuine smile. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I know this must be overwhelming. Overwhelming." The word seems inadequate to describe the whirlwind of emotions I feel. Hope, fear, anger, relief, confusion, all mixed into an indigestible mass in my stomach. As we walk through the sterile corridors, Elena explains the process with the efficiency of someone who's had this conversation many times. "Michael is physically well," she says, our footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. "Malnourished, of course, but nothing that can't be treated with time and proper care. Emotionally, well, that's more complex. He has some memory gaps, which is completely normal after prolonged trauma." Memory gaps. I wonder what pieces of our life together disappeared from his mind. Does he remember our first meeting at a college party when he spilled beer on my blouse and spent the whole night apologizing? Does he remember our wedding, small but perfect, in my parents' backyard? Does he remember the last fight we had before he disappeared? That fight. I tried not to think about it during all these years, but now it comes back with full force, like a wound that never completely healed. It was about money, as always. I wanted us to buy a house. We had saved enough for the down payment, and I was tired of paying rent. He thought we weren't ready yet, that we should wait another year. Harsh words were said, accusations about financial responsibility, about dreams versus reality. I slept on the couch that night, stubborn and hurt. The next morning, he left for work without saying goodbye, still angry. It was the last time I saw him. For years, I blamed myself for that fight. If we hadn't argued, maybe he wouldn't have left home in that state of mind. Maybe he would have paid more attention to his surroundings. Maybe he would have noticed if someone was following him. But maybe is a dangerous word. It can consume you if you let it. 15 years is a long time, Elena continues, interrupting my dark thoughts. Both for him and for you. You've both changed, evolved, adapted to impossible circumstances. It's important to have realistic expectations about the reconnection process. Realistic expectations. As if there were something realistic about this entire situation. Does he remember me? I ask, and I hate how my voice sounds small and insecure. Elena stops and looks at me kindly. He remembers. Actually, it was the first thing he asked when he regained consciousness at the hospital. Where is my wife? Where is Sarah? Something inside my chest loosens when I hear this. After 15 years, I'm still the first person he thinks of. We stop in front of a simple door, without identification. Elena knocks gently before turning to me. Mrs. Mitchell, before we go in, it's important that you understand the man you're going to meet isn't exactly the same one who left. Trauma changes people. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. I nod, pretending to understand. But how can anyone really prepare for this? Elena opens the door, and then he's there. My heart stops completely for a moment, then races as if trying to compensate for the lost beats. He's sitting in a simple chair next to a low table, and when he sees me, he stands up slowly. It's Michael, but it's also not. It's like looking at a photograph that's been left in the sun too long. You still recognize the image, but the colors have faded. The outlines have become less defined. He's thin, much thinner than he was. His hair, which used to be dark brown and always well cut, is now gray and long, touching his shoulders. There's a beard that hides half his face, and a small but visible scar on his forehead that definitely wasn't there before. He's wearing borrowed clothes that are too big for him. A light blue shirt and khaki pants that seem to have been chosen by someone trying to make him look normal again. But it's the eyes that shock me most. They're still brown, still have that slightly almond shape I used to trace with my finger when he was sleeping. But there's something in them now that didn't exist before, an empty quality. As if he'd seen things no one should see, experienced things that changed something fundamental inside him. "Hi, Sarah," he says, and his voice is hoarse, as if it hadn't been used properly for a long time. "Hi," I whisper back, because it's all I can manage. We look at each other for a moment that seems to last an eternity. 15 years of separation stretch between us like an abyss. I don't know if it can be crossed. I want to run to him, hug him, cry with relief. But I also want to run in the opposite direction, flee this impossible situation I don't know how to navigate. "You look different," he says finally, and there's hesitation in his voice, as if he wasn't sure he should comment on it. 15 years, Michael," I respond, and there's a hint of bitterness in my voice I can't completely hide. He nods slowly, as if processing not just my words, but the entire concept of time past. "I know. I remember some things. Others I don't. It's like my mind is a puzzle with missing pieces." He sits down again, gesturing for me to do the same. I choose the chair across the table, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain some emotional distance. "Do you remember me?" I ask, and I hate how the question sounds vulnerable. "Of course I remember," he says, and there's a glimpse of the Michael I knew in his eyes. "You're my wife. You were the most important thing in my life. Were." The past tense doesn't go unnoticed. "Where were you?" I ask, because I need to know, even if the answer destroys me. He rubs his temples with his fingers, a gesture I remember him doing when he was stressed or trying to concentrate. At least that hasn't changed. It's hard to explain, he says slowly. Sometimes things get scrambled in my head, like someone had mixed all my memories and I'm trying to separate them again. Try, I say, leaning forward. Please. He takes a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep waters. I was coming home from work. I remember the subway, the noise of wheels on tracks, the smell of people and food and life. Then, he stops, his eyes becoming distant. Then, darkness. When I woke up, I was somewhere else, far away, very far away. What place? He hesitates, and I see something like fear cross his face. I don't know exactly where. It was hot, always hot, and dry. There were other people, like me, people who had been taken, other hostages. The word hangs in the air between us, heavy and terrible. Did you try to escape? I ask. He laughs, but there's no humor in the sound. It's bitter, broken. At first, yes, we all tried at first. But then, he shakes his head. Then you learn it's better not to try, that the consequences of trying are worse than staying. There's pain in his voice that breaks my heart. My Michael, who was always so determined, so full of life and hope, learned to give up. What did they do to him during all those years? What kind of systematic breaking of human will did he experience? Michael, I say gently, you don't have to talk about this now if you don't want to. He looks at me with gratitude. Thank you. It's just that, sometimes when I talk about it, I feel like I'm still there. Elena enters discreetly, knocking gently on the door before opening it. Sorry to interrupt. Michael, it's time for your medical exam with Dr. Patterson. He stands up, but hesitates, looking at me with an almost desperate expression. Sarah, will you come back? The question catches me completely by surprise. For me, it's obvious I'll come back. He's my husband. But then I realize that for him, nothing is obvious. He doesn't know if I still have room for him in my life. Doesn't know if I still love him. Doesn't know if 15 years of absence destroyed any chance of rebuilding something together. Yes, I say, and my voice is firmer than I feel. I'll come back. He smiles then, and for a fleeting moment, I see the man who married me 17 years ago. The man who used to make me laugh until my stomach hurt. The man who held me during storms because I was afraid of lightning. Thank you, he whispers, and there's so much relief in his voice it almost makes me cry. I leave the center completely dazed. The world seems different, as if someone had adjusted the color saturation or changed the quality of light. People on the street continue their normal lives, buying coffee, talking on phones, complaining about traffic, without knowing my world just turned upside down. I sit in my car in the parking lot and call Betty because I need to talk to someone who knows me, someone who understands the weight of what just happened. How was he? She asks immediately, without even saying hello. Different, I say, because it's the only word I can find that encompasses everything. Thinner, more fragile. But it's still him, Betty. It's still Michael. Are you sure? The question irritates me more than it should. Of course I'm sure. He's my husband. There's a long pause on the other end of the line. He was your husband, dear, 15 years ago. What do you mean by that? I'm just saying that, well, you rebuilt your life, Sarah. You have your work, your friends, your routine. You found a kind of peace after years of pain. Are you sure you want to give that up? Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach, because she's right. I did find a kind of peace. It wasn't easy. It took years of therapy, years of nights crying alone, years learning to be a complete person on my own. But I managed it. I built a life that works, a life that makes sense. And now Michael has returned to potentially destroy all of that. No, it's not fair to think that way. He didn't choose to be kidnapped. Didn't choose to stay away for 15 years. If anyone's to blame here, it's the people who took him, who stole 15 years of our life together. But still, Betty's question echoes in my mind. Are you sure you want to give up the peace you found? He's my husband, I repeat, more to myself than to Betty. I know, dear, just be careful, with your heart. After I hang up, I sit in the car for a long time, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. A woman with a baby stroller, smiling at the child, babbling happily. An elderly man walking slowly with a cane, stopping to greet a neighbor. A young couple holding hands, laughing at something one of them said. Normal lives, simple lives, lives that make sense. I used to have a life like that. Michael and I used to be that young couple, walking hand in hand, making plans for the future. We would buy a house, have children, grow old together. What naive future we thought we'd have. That night, Elena calls. Her voice is professional, but I can detect a note of hesitation. Mrs. Mitchell, Michael would like to know if it would be possible to stay with you for a few days while we arrange permanent accommodation for him. There are protocols to follow, paperwork to fill out, but ultimately, he needs a place to stay, and he specifically asked to stay with you. The question catches me by surprise, though it shouldn't. Of course he wants to stay with me. I'm his wife, but the idea of sharing my space, my carefully constructed sanctuary, with someone, even if it's Michael, makes me anxious. He can come tomorrow, I say after a pause that probably lasted too long. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. This means a lot to him, and if there are any problems, anything at all, call me immediately. After I hang up, I spend the entire night arranging the apartment. Not that it's messy. I've always been organized, a trait that intensified during my years of living alone. But suddenly, everything seems wrong. The couch cushions are the wrong color, too feminine, too delicate. The books on the shelf are all novels and biographies of women, nothing Michael might want to read. The entire decoration screams single woman in a way I never noticed before. Over the last 15 years, this apartment became my sanctuary. Every object has its specific place. Every corner reflects my personality, my tastes, my needs. It's a space created by a woman who lives alone, for a woman who lives alone. Now I'm going to have to share it with a stranger who used to be my husband. I stop in front of the framed photo on the side table, Michael and me on our wedding day. We're smiling, young, radiant, full of hope for the future. I'm wearing a simple but elegant dress I bought on sale. He's wearing the only suit he owned at the time. We're in my parents' backyard, surrounded by family and friends, most of whom have drifted away from my life over the years. What naive future we thought we'd have. What naive people we were. I hesitate, my hand hovering over the photo. Part of me wants to hide it, because it hurts to look at who we were. But another part of me, the part that still believes in miracles, wants to leave it exactly where it is. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to try to rebuild something with Michael, I need to be honest about who we were, and about who we've become. I leave the photo where it is. I prepare the couch with clean sheets and an extra pillow. Michael will sleep here, at least at first. The idea of sharing the bed with him is still too complicated. We're strangers now, no matter what our marriage certificates say. The next morning, they arrive punctually at 10 o'clock. Elena accompanies Michael to the door, carrying a small canvas bag that apparently contains everything he owns in the world now. Any problems, anything at all, call me, she repeats before leaving. And there's something in her tone that makes me think she's seen these reunions go wrong before. And then it's just the two of us. Michael stands in the entrance for a moment, looking around the apartment slowly, as if memorizing every detail or trying to reconcile his memories with reality. It's almost the same, he says finally. Almost, I confirm. He walks through the living room carefully, as if visiting a museum. He touches the back of the couch, examines the books on the shelf, stops in front of the window that faces the street. The view changed, he observes. He's right. When we moved here, there was a Victorian house across the street. Now it's a modern, characterless apartment building. They tore down the house 5 years ago, I explain. Built that building. He nods, but I see the change disturbs him. Another piece of evidence of how much time has passed, how much of the world he knew has disappeared. He sees our wedding photo and picks it up carefully, as if it were something precious and fragile. His fingers trace our young faces through the glass. We were happy, he says, and it's not a question. We were, I confirm. and my voice comes out softer than I intend. Can I hug you? He asks then. And there's something so vulnerable in the question that my heart breaks a little. I hesitate for just a second that probably lasts an eternity for him, before approaching. He hugs me gently, as if I might break if he squeezed too hard. The hug is strange, awkward. Our bodies don't fit together the same way anymore. He's thinner, more angular. I'm different too, more tense, less willing to completely surrender to the moment. But still, for an instant, I smell him. Different. Hospital soap and borrowed clothes, but still familiar somewhere deep in my memory. You must be hungry, I say when we separate, because I need something practical to do, something that gives me purpose. A little, he admits. In the kitchen, I prepare sandwiches while he watches every movement I make. It's disconcerting, this constant attention, as if he's trying to memorize the way I cut tomatoes or spread butter on bread. Do you still make that special mustard sauce? He asks suddenly. The question catches me completely by surprise. The mustard sauce. I had completely forgotten I used to make that. It was a recipe I learned from my grandmother. Dijon mustard mixed with honey and a touch of balsamic vinegar. Michael loved it. How do you remember that? I ask, stopping cutting the tomato to look at him. He smiles for the first time since he returned, and for a moment I see a glimpse of the man who married me. Some things stayed, the important ones. My heart warms, but there's also sadness in my smile. I don't make it anymore. I changed many things over the years. His expression changes subtly, as if I'd said something that hurt him. Oh, and I realize that every change I made, every adaptation I created to survive without him, is a small betrayal in his eyes. He returned expecting to find the life he left, preserved like a museum. But that life doesn't exist anymore. I don't exist anymore, at least not the way he remembers. We eat in silence, the weight of 15 years of separation pressing on us like a cloud. He eats slowly, savoring each bite as if he wasn't sure when the next meal would be. Another reminder of what he went through. Sarah, he says finally. Did you wait for me? The question I was dreading, the question I don't have a simple answer for. For a long time, I say carefully. But not always, he observes. And it's not an accusation. It's just a sad statement. Michael, you were dead. To me, to everyone. I had to move on, or I would have gone crazy. I understand, he says. But I see in his face that understanding intellectually and accepting emotionally are different things. The first days are a strange dance of courtesy and discomfort. Michael tries to be helpful, offering to wash dishes or make coffee, but he doesn't know where things are. The kitchen organization has completely changed. The glasses are in a different cabinet. The coffee is a different brand. Even the way I organize plates in the dishwasher is different. Small things, but they cruelly highlight how much time has passed. He also has nightmares. On the first night, I wake up to him screaming on the couch. I run to the living room and find him sitting, sweating profusely, eyes wide with terror, looking at something only he can see. Sorry, he says, breathing heavily. Sometimes I dream about things. What kind of things? I ask, sitting carefully on the edge of the coffee table. He shakes his head vigorously. I don't want to scare you, but I'm already scared. Not by his nightmares, but by the distance between us. We're in the same house, breathing the same air, but we might as well be on different planets. During the day, we try to talk. I tell him about my work at school, about how I like teaching literature to teenagers, about how gratifying it is to see a student finally understand a difficult concept. I tell him about Betty, about how she became a maternal figure in my life. I tell him about the small changes in the neighborhood, the bakery that closed, the new cafe that opened, the young family that moved next door. He listens attentively, making occasional questions, but I see he's struggling to process everything. 15 years of life condensed into fragmented conversations. Do you like teaching? He asks while we're having coffee one morning. I do, I say. It wasn't what I originally planned to do, but things changed. Because of me, he says, and there's heavy guilt in his voice. No, I respond quickly. Not because of you. Because of circumstances. But we both know it's the same thing. It's on the third night that the first really concerning incident happens. I wake up at 3 in the morning to noise in the kitchen. I get up quickly, worried, and find Michael frantically searching through drawers. "Michael, what are you doing?" He doesn't look at me, continues searching desperately. "The key. Where did you put the key?" "What key?" "The safe key. Where are the important documents? The insurance papers?" I frown, completely confused. "Michael, we never had a safe. And what insurance papers?" He stops then and looks at me, total confusion stamped on his face. For a moment he doesn't recognize me. There's something wild in his eyes, something that makes me instinctively take a step back. "No? But I remember there were important documents, papers that needed to be kept safe. Michael, are you okay?" I ask gently, approaching slowly. He rubs his head vigorously with both hands, as if trying to force the memories to organize themselves. Sorry. Sometimes I get confused. Things get mixed up in my head. I guide him back to the couch, but my mind is racing. What documents? What safe? Where does this memory come from? And why did he seem so desperate to find something that never existed? "Michael," I say gently when he calms down, "do you remember our honeymoon?" He smiles, and for a moment seems more relaxed. "Of course. Cape Cod, that small hotel near the beach. You got sunburned on the first day." My blood freezes. "Our honeymoon was in Vermont, Michael, in the mountains. We stayed at an inn that had a fireplace in the room." He looks at me for a long moment, and I see panic growing in his eyes. "Vermont. Of course, Vermont." But I see he doesn't remember. He's just agreeing with me, trying to cover up the confusion. The next morning, I call Dr. Carter, the psychiatrist Elena mentioned. I explain the situation, the memory confusions, the nightmares, the search for things that never existed. He listens patiently and schedules an appointment for the same day. When I tell Michael about the appointment, he agrees readily, but I see the relief in his eyes. He also knows something isn't right. Dr. James Carter is a man about 50 years old, with gray hair and a calm presence that immediately inspires confidence. His office is welcoming, with green plants and books, nothing that reminds of a cold clinical environment. While Michael is in session, I wait in the waiting room, flipping through magazines without really reading them. My mind is elsewhere, processing all the small inconsistencies I've been noticing. The confusion about our honeymoon, the search for the non-existent safe, the way he hesitates before answering questions about our past, as if trying to remember something he read instead of something he lived. After an hour, Dr. Carter calls me to talk. His office is even more welcoming than the waiting room, with diplomas on the walls and a family photo on the desk. "How is he?" I ask immediately, sitting in the comfortable chair across from his desk. "Physically, he's recovering well. Mentally, it's more complex." He sits down, clasping his hands on the desk. He has clear symptoms of severe PTSD, which is completely expected after prolonged trauma. But there are also some inconsistencies in the memories. What kind of inconsistencies? Details that don't match reality, places, dates, specific events. It could be a direct result of trauma. The mind sometimes creates narratives to fill gaps, especially after severe traumatic experiences. Are you saying he's making things up? Not necessarily making up consciously, but memory is much more fragile and malleable than we like to admit. And 15 years of trauma can do extraordinarily strange things to the human mind. His words echo in my head all the way home. Fragile memories, created narratives. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for any chance of rebuilding our life together? That night, during dinner, I decide to test Michael more directly. I need to know how far these inconsistencies go. "How was it with Dr. Carter?" I ask, cutting the chicken with more force than necessary. "Good. He asked a lot of questions." "About what?" "About before, about work, about our life together, about what happened." I take a deep breath, preparing myself. "Do you remember your boss? Mr. Morrison? He responds too quickly without hesitation. Of course, tall man, gray hair, always wore blue ties. My heart sinks. Michael, you never worked for Morrison. You worked for Hendricks and Associates. He stops eating, the fork suspended in the air. I see confusion and then irritation cross his face in waves. Sometimes I confuse the names. My head is messed up, Sarah. You can't expect me to remember everything perfectly after what I went through. And your boss was a woman, I continue, relentless now. Sandra Hendricks. You worked for her for 3 years before you disappeared. You always complained she was too demanding, but you admired her dedication. Michael gets up from the table abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. You have no idea what I went through. 15 years of hell. You can't expect me to remember every insignificant detail. I'm not asking for insignificant details, I say, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. I'm asking for basic truths about our life. Do you think I'm lying? The question hangs in the air between us like toxic smoke, because that's exactly the question I'm starting to ask myself, and I don't have an answer that won't destroy one of us. I don't know what to think, I admit. He leaves the kitchen with heavy steps, and I'm left alone with my thoughts and a table full of half-eaten food. I can't sleep that night. I lie in bed, listening to Michael tossing restlessly on the couch, and my mind won't stop working. The inconsistencies are accumulating like storm clouds, and I can no longer ignore them. The next morning, Betty appears at my door with a serious expression I know well. It's the expression she makes when she has something important to tell me, but doesn't know how to approach the subject. We need to talk, she says without preamble. We sit at my kitchen table with strong coffee, and Betty places a manila folder in front of me with the care of someone handling explosives. I did some research, she says, about Michael's disappearance. I thought you should see this. I open the folder with trembling hands and find printouts of old newspaper articles, police reports, even some grainy photos. It's strange and disturbing to see our personal tragedy documented this way, reduced to headlines and clinical paragraphs. Look at the date, Betty says, pointing to a Boston Globe article. I read, Engineer disappears on Friday, March 14, 2008, leaving work at Morrison Construction. Friday, I murmur, feeling my stomach contract. But Michael told me it was Monday. And look at this, Betty turns the page carefully. It says here he was going home by car, not subway. He had just bought a used blue Honda Civic. My stomach twists even more. How could I forget about the car? We had saved for months to buy it. Michael was so proud, washed it every weekend. Maybe he's confused about the details. I begin, but my voice sounds weak, even to me. Sarah. Betty interrupts me gently, turning more pages. Look at the photo. It's a photo of Michael's company ID badge. Morrison Construction. He really worked for Morrison, not Hendricks. I was completely wrong. I was confused, I whisper, about where he worked. But then why did he hesitate when you mentioned Morrison? Why didn't he correct you immediately? It's an excellent question. A question I have no answer for. Betty turns a few more pages, revealing the official police report. And there's this. It's a detailed physical description of Michael from the missing person report. Height, 6'. Weight, 180 lbs, brown eyes, dark brown hair. And then, at the bottom, distinctive birthmark on left side of neck, approximately 1.2 inches in diameter. My blood freezes completely. The man in my house doesn't have a birthmark. I would have noticed. I've been watching every inch of him, looking for signs of the Michael I knew. Sarah, Betty says very gently, placing her hand over mine. Are you absolutely sure this man is your husband? The question I was desperately avoiding is finally asked out loud. And for the first time in a week, I don't have an immediate answer. He has the same eyes, I say weakly. Many people have brown eyes, dear. I close the folder forcefully, as if that could make the evidence disappear. He remembers things, the mustard sauce, intimate details. What details? I think for a moment, trying to remember something specific only Michael would know. But I realize, with growing horror, that most of the memories he shared were vague or incorrect. Betty, what are you suggesting? She sighs deeply. I'm not suggesting anything. I just think you should ask some hard questions. I return home with my heart racing and Betty's folder in my hands. Michael is in the kitchen, making coffee, whistling softly a song I don't recognize. I observe his neck carefully for the first time. No birthmark. Michael, I say, placing the folder on the table with more force than I intend. He turns, and something in my expression makes him stop whistling immediately. What is that? He asks, looking at the folder as if it were a bomb about to explode. Articles about your disappearance, police reports, your official physical description. I open the folder and show him the description. He reads in silence, and I see his expression gradually change from confusion to something like panic. You don't have a birthmark, I say, my voice firmer than I feel. You confused the dates. You don't remember basic details about our life together. You hesitated when I mentioned Morrison, even though you worked there. Sarah, please, who are you? The question comes out harsher than I intend, but I can no longer pretend. The evidence is accumulating like an avalanche, and I can no longer ignore it. Michael, or whoever he is, sits heavily in the kitchen chair. For a long moment he stays silent, looking at his own hands as if he'd never seen them before. When he finally speaks, his voice is completely different, lower, more real, more broken. My name is David Chen, he says, and the words fall between us like stones. I was in the same place as your husband. We became very close during the years. He talked about you constantly. Sarah this, Sarah that. He told me everything about you both, about your life together. The world collapses around me. I literally feel as if the ground had disappeared under my feet. Where is Michael? I ask, and my voice sounds strange, distant. David, I can never call him Michael again, never again. Shakes his head slowly, tears beginning to form in his eyes. He died 3 years ago. Infection we couldn't treat adequately. We didn't have adequate medical resources. The tears come like a bursting dam. 15 years of hope, a week of confusion, and now this. Michael is really dead. Always was, at least for the last 3 years. He made me promise, David continues, his voice breaking too. If I ever got out, I'd come tell you he loved you, that he never stopped loving you, that he thought about you every day, that he regretted that last fight about the house. Why did you lie? I ask between sobs. Why did you pretend to be him? David looks up at me, and I see he's crying too. Because when I saw how you looked at me that first day, like I was a miracle, like I was the answer to your prayers, I couldn't break your heart. And because, he hesitates, wiping his face with the back of his hand, because I had nowhere to go, no family looking for me, no one who cared if I came back or not. For the first time in 15 years, someone was happy to see me. Someone wanted me. The pain in his voice is so deep that for a moment my own pain diminishes. I see a man who lost as much as I did, who clung to a fantasy of family because he had nothing of his own. David, I say gently, do you have family? Someone who was looking for you? He shakes his head. My parents died when I was young. I don't have siblings. I was single when I was taken. I worked as an accountant at a small company. No one noticed when I disappeared, except my boss, who probably just hired someone else. The loneliness in his words is devastating. You need to go, I say finally, because I can no longer sustain this lie, no matter how well-intentioned. I can't pretend you're him? He nods, understanding completely. I know, sorry, I just wanted it to work, wanted to have a family, even if it was borrowed. Where will you stay? Elena is helping find a place, a small apartment through an assistance program. I'll get a job, start over for real this time. No lies. He gets up to leave, picking up the small bag he brought. Before reaching the door, he turns one last time. Sarah? Michael. He really talked about you every day. He said you made the best mustard sauce in the world, that your laugh was like music, that you were the strongest person he knew. He said he deeply regretted the last fight you had about buying a house, said you were right, that you should have bought the house. And he said, David stops, his voice breaking again. He said that if anything happened to him, he wanted you to be happy, to find someone who would love you the way you deserve to be loved. New tears come, but this time they're different. They're tears of closure, of a final conversation I never thought I'd have. Thank you, I whisper, for bringing me his words. David nods and leaves, closing the door gently behind him, leaving me alone with the truth finally revealed. 2 weeks later, I'm in the kitchen making mustard sauce for the first time in years. Not for David, not for Michael's ghost, but for myself. Because some traditions deserve to be preserved, even when the people who inspired them are gone. Betty comes to visit me, as she always does. She asks how I'm dealing with everything. I tell the truth. It's complicated. I lost Michael twice now. First when he disappeared, then when I discovered he really died 3 years ago. But I also gained something precious. Certainty, closure, the final words he wanted me to hear. And David? She asks, tasting the sauce and approving with a nod. He's doing well. Elena told me he got a job at a garage on the other side of town. He's doing real therapy now, processing his own traumas, building his own life. Do you talk to him? I shake my head. It wouldn't be healthy, for either of us. But sometimes, when I pass the garage on my way to school, I see a man with his back turned working on a car, and my heart jumps. Not because I think it's Michael. I know it's not. But because David also deserves a second chance at life. I put our wedding photo in a drawer, but not because I want to forget Michael. I put it away because it's time to stop living in the past. 15 years is too long to wait for someone who won't come back. But it's not too late to start living again. I prayed for peace my whole life. Today I finally know what it looks like. It's not the absence of pain. It's the presence of clarity. It's knowing that some wounds heal, others leave scars, and both are part of who we are. It's understanding that love doesn't end with death, but transforms into something different. Memories, lessons, the strength to continue. Peace in the streets doesn't erase the war we fight inside our homes. But sometimes, when we stop fighting reality and start accepting it, we discover the war is over, and that we didn't just survive, we learned to live again. Michael is at peace now, and finally, so am I.